Gentlemen, today we want to talk about how you can master emotional bureaucracy in modern marriage or in modern relationships. The whole idea about this talk is to provide you with tools to preserve your sovereignty in the age of emotional paperwork. Okay? So that's the point. I'm going to start this presentation with a question. And I'm looking at a situation where over time, marriage has been slowly been made to become like a bureaucracy. So let me ask you, for the guys who are married or the people who are in relationships, have you ever felt like your marriage or relationship has turned into a full-time administrative job? Like you're endlessly filling out emotional forms, stamping psychological paperwork, and standing in line at the counter of her moods just to keep the household functional. Many men have felt this way, and this is why you find several guys spending a lot of time in the club. And the men who are tired of this, they just go home to sleep. The emotional bureaucracy at home is too much. And some guys resigned themselves to it. They call it happy wife, happy life. So think of the Sunday night emotional audit when you're told we need to talk. So many guys, when they're told we need to talk, there is trouble. Okay? It's like here when you're in primary school, you're told go to the headmaster's office. You've been called by the headmaster or the head teacher. Okay? So when you're told we need to talk, and then you're asked to review last week's tone in the three conversations. Okay, you told on this day you say this, on Wednesday I called you and you said this, and so on and so forth. So you explain why did you answer my text late, and you also propose a plan about increased assurance. How are you going to assure her that this is not going to happen again? That is not intimacy, gentlemen. That is workflow management. And you're not alone. Modern marriage often operates like a bureaucracy of feelings, where men are expected to constantly validate, soothe, and process their partner's emotions. What was once a covenant of roles and responsibilities has evolved into an emotional HR department, where failure to comply with the paperwork results in penalties. And these penalties take the form of withdrawn intimacy, arguments, and even divorce. Okay? So, why is this going on? There's a basis for it. One of the things we normally teach in Red Pill is that human beings engage in purposeful behavior. Everything that a fellow human being does, there's normally a purpose for it. And at the root of all human behavior is survival. So evolutionary psychology suggests that the repeated checks on a man's investment are adaptive. They're adaptive mechanisms that are supposed to ensure that provisioning and commitment are provided to the woman. So Michael Rosenfield wrote a book called Who Wants a Breakup? And in that book, there's a research that shows that women initiate roughly 2/3 of divorces, highlighting how relationship dissatisfaction and leverage often skew the female. And this is one of the reasons why the world has become a simping economy, because women escalate their demands and their needs so much that men, for fear of losing these women, they find themselves simping. They go beyond what our fathers would do. Okay? And that's what we want to talk about. That's what we call emotional bureaucracy. I'm going to illustrate with more examples. So, with this emotional bureaucracy, unless you learn to navigate it, you will either burn out, or worse, you're going to surrender your masculine sovereignty. Most men who surrender their masculine sovereignty are what we call beta males. They are the ones we call simps. Okay? Because now you become at the beck and call of your woman, you comply with everything that she wants. And there's, of course, a consequence to that. So what we normally say is that desire cannot be negotiated. Rollo Tomassi, the author of Rational Male, talks about this. You cannot negotiate desire. And things like co-play and complying to what a woman wants, that is part of negotiating desire. There's a book called Mating in Captivity by Esther Perel. It also illustrates that erotic desire thrives in distance and polarity, not endless validation. You don't need to comply for your woman to find you desirable. Actually, the opposite. And at this point, I want to mention that the erosion of our culture also has been to our detriment. You remember among the Kikuyu, the man used to have a tingira where he could hang out with the sons. The Luos had their bila, where the man and the sons would hang out, and every woman had their own house. But because of rural urban migration and living in rented apartments and small houses, we are forced to live in such close quarters. And this is one of the reasons that desire has been killed. Living in very close quarters actually kills erotic desire. And it's one of the reasons why we have a lot of sexless marriages. But we'll revisit that. So, field wisdom goes, women make rules for betas and they break them for alphas. And that's a dynamic that has also been echoed in Myron Gaines' book, Why Women Deserve Less. So what is the psychological framework for emotional bureaucracy? I've already mentioned the evolutionary psychology perspective, why women create this bureaucracy. And David Bass says in his book, Evolution of Desire, that women evolved to test male commitment. Because across millennia, survival hinged on securing consistent provisioning and protection. So during the Stone Age days, the hunter and gatherer days, the woman needed to ensure that the provider and the protector was always in touch and was always available. So this is one of the reasons why women keep wanting to do these shit tests. Okay? So the tests often manifest as emotional demands and constant validation requests. These are mechanisms that are designed to gauge a man's investment. Okay? So a woman can tell you, for example, if you cared, you'd have called me during lunch. Maybe your guys are both working, you're a career couple, she has a job, you have your job, but she tells you didn't call her during lunchtime. Okay? The content is minor, but the function is commitment sensing. Are you still committed to me? That is what she's trying to establish. Across cultures, Bass data shows that women prioritize resource stability and reliability more heavily than men. And this aspect of women prioritizing resource stability and availability more than men is one of the reasons why women can sometimes become dream killers. Okay? Many people meet their girlfriends or their future wives when they're very ambitious. But once they get married, the woman, because she is so intent on securing the provisioning, if you want to start a business or you want to chase an opportunity abroad, she's going to discourage you. Okay? Because they are risk averse. They want to hold on to what is available. And that is one of the reasons why many men who get married, you realize that they soften up, they become fat, they become obese, and so on, because they stop taking risks, they stop pushing themselves. It's because the woman is more interested in consolidating what is available. Okay? There are, of course, a few women who are also able to have a long-term view and be able to take risks and encourage their men to take risks. But the majority would rather consolidate what is available. So this shit test is what Rollo Tomassi calls fitness tests in the rational male. And they are subtle, often unconscious strategies that women use to measure whether a man is truly in control of himself or enslaved by her frame. Okay? So it's counterintuitive. On the one hand, she wants to confirm that the provisioning and protection is there. On the other hand, she's checking, is he really the man I think he is? Is he really an alpha? Or is a pansia's beta male who has no backbone? Okay? So for example, you can have a sudden trivial accusation right before a big meeting. Okay, maybe you're going for a meeting or you want to leave, you want to go to work, and then she just brings up an issue at the wrong time. The timing is wrong. She wants to bring up an issue. Okay, if you derail your mission, to plead your case or to appease her, you signal that her frame overrides your purpose, which means you are of a low status in red pill terms. Okay? So those are like tests, and you have to know that you have to always hold the frame. Don't enter her frame. If she's bringing chaos at the wrong time, you have to hold your frame. If you had plans, you continue the plans. You're going to sort whatever it is that she's bringing later. So what does this mean? This means that emotional bureaucracy is not just random. It's an evolutionary pressure that is designed to screen out weak men. Okay? There is a book written by Esther Vilar, okay? And there is a book, Esther Vilar and Perel, Mating in Captivity. Remember, Esther Vilar wrote The Manipulated Man. So there's a bridge between these two books, Mating in Captivity and Manipulated Man. Perel, who wrote Mating in Captivity, observes that desire requires distance, overprocessing suffocates passion. So when you're over-processing and over-explaining and becoming very close, you're actually suffocating passion. Distance is what is required, and polarity. We don't need to be the same. You don't need to watch the same movies, love the same foods, and so on. In The Manipulated Man, Esther Vilar says that modern expectations effectively domesticate men into bureaucrats of female emotion. Modern expectations effectively domesticate men into bureaucrats of female emotion. The emotional labor is so much that men find themselves managing a woman's emotion is like a full-time job. It is so bad that we have a program called Man Enough in the Catholic and Anglican Church, where, among other things, men are told how to listen to their wives and to take care of them and to put them first. Okay? Which is very, very unfortunate. So emotional bureaucracy is the hidden red tape in modern relationships. The hoops that one must jump through just to access intimacy. I'll give you another example. You have a man, and this is very common in Kenya. You have a man who is interested in a woman. Maybe you've gone out for a few dates, and now you want the box, okay? Instead of openness and giving you the emotional intimacy that you want, you're told that first you need to take me to Dubai, or you need to buy me the latest iPhone. Okay? Or sometimes, depending on how cheap she is or how old she is, she can tell you she needs money for her hair, for the salon, for the nail tech. Okay? You'll find the nail tech is smashing it for free. Okay? In another case, you can also have a man who spends long hours at work. Okay? When he goes home, he's told, "You've not been checking on me enough." Okay? Your affection is measured not by your effort to provide, but by whether you've complied to an unspoken protocol of daily validation. So this is what the escalation that women are bringing in terms of the relationships, the escalating demands. There's a guy, I think one day I'll share that video of a man walking a dog in the forest. He explains why men become simps, and this is one of it. Women take the things men do for them for granted, and they instead erect an emotional bureaucracy that you have to jump through. And in the process of jumping through, you become a simp. So these are not isolated incidents. These are everyday examples of how love and intimacy get entangled in rules, in conditions, and compliance tests. Emotional bureaucracy creates barriers where there should be bridges, turning what should be spontaneous into and authentic into a transaction and a checklist. So we've looked at the evolutionary psychology part, where we looked at David Bass, Esther Perel, and also we've looked at Esther Vilar. There is also an angle for behavioral psychology, where we are looking at paperwork as operant conditioning. And remember, operant conditioning is unplugged 5. Unplugged 5 is over here. Okay? Unplugged 5 talks about operant conditioning. So, and this was the preeminent scholar when it comes to operant conditioning is B.F. Skinner. He wrote a book called Science and Human Behavior. And in that book, he demonstrated that behaviors reinforced over time become habits. And when a wife demands emotional paperwork, constant reassurance, and apologies for minor infractions, over explanations, and the man complies, he reinforces that system and he becomes a beta male, he becomes a simp. This is what Rich Cooper calls betaization through 1,000 concessions. Okay? The woman will need you to call her every time, explain where you went, explain why you didn't pick her call. Every time she calls, you have to pick, even if you're in the middle of something. Don't fall for that. That is losing your sovereignty. And any man who loses his sovereignty to a woman or loses his frame, there is only one result: dust is waiting. So this continuous demands, they create a loop. So first she demands, he complies. She escalates, he complies more. And soon the marriage is no longer intimacy. It becomes now compliance management. Okay? There's a book called Marital Processes Predictive of Later Dissolution by John Gottman. He identifies criticism and contempt as key predictors of divorce. Over defending and over explaining, what red pill circles call JADE. JADE is an abbreviation for justify, argue, defend, and explain. They feed these destructive cycles. And people who've studied narcissistic uh, abuse and narcissistic behavior, there's something that is called the gray rock technique. You don't have to respond to every tiff, every argument. You don't need to explain yourself all the time. And explaining yourself to another person means you're treating that person as if they're the person in authority. You need to remember that. So, for example, when you go home and you're asked, "Umetoka wapi?" or you're told, "Why didn't you pick my call?" And you start saying, "Oh, you see, I was busy. I was in a meeting. My boss was with me." When you're explaining, it means you are entering a frame. You are accepting that she's in authority. The same way when you're walking the street and then the police tell you, "Hey, young man, stop. Where are you going?" You say, "Oh, you see, I'm going to the supermarket." And they tell you, "Where is your ID?" You show your ID. It's because the policeman is a person of authority. That is why you are responding to those questions. So when a woman asks you these questions and you're actually responding to them, it means either she's testing your frame or she's testing you, or she views herself as a person in authority in that particular relationship. How you respond to it either confirms that idea or destroys it. In Unplugged 3, we say that every time you bend over to meet unreasonable demands, you are teaching her to see you as less sovereign, less desirable, and less worthy of respect. You're basically confirming her fears that you are a beta male, a pansias man with no backbone. So the bureaucracy metaphor is what we call death by 1,000 forms. You fill so many forms, they're in their thousands. So think of it like the government red tape. When you're dealing with the government, you start with a simple form, okay? Maybe you're filling, you have to show that you've entered that office. And then soon you start with one form, and then there are 10 sub forms, 3 stamps, and a long waiting line. What was once manageable becomes draining. That is how the bureaucracy works. So in the same way, in marriage or in relationships, you love, it starts as one small request. You're told, "Why don't you talk to me anymore? Why don't you call me anymore? You don't buy me lunch anymore. You don't buy me gifts anymore. We don't go out for my birthday anymore. We don't go out anymore," and so on and so forth. So it becomes a set of escalating forms. "Why don't you tell me you love me more often? Why don't you share your feelings? What are you thinking?" Okay? Until eventually, intimacy is drowned in administrative overload. And of course, it also destroys the mystery. The more you explicate, the more you destroy the mystery. In Mating in Captivity, Esther Perel tells us that too much intimacy and emotional paperwork destroys polarity. You cannot fill out forms or to get desire or in your way to arousal. The way to arousal is not by filling out many forms or by complying to many demands or by jumping many hoops. I'll give you an example of men who try this and fail. An example is Will Smith. When Will Smith got into a relationship with Jada Pinkett, He feel all the emotional bureaucracy that she erected. Okay, you remember about the birthday that he threw a very big birthday, and Jada was telling him he was an egotistical for throwing such a big birthday. It was for him, not for her. So his disparate attempts to manage Jada's discontent. Okay, remember Jada is Tupac Shakur's alpha widow. Even their children have written letters to Tupac to come back because the mother is missing him. So what Will did, he went a long extent to appease her. So he had disparate attempts. He made public confessions. He over-validated her. You remember there's a famous photo of him presenting Jada like she's God's gift to mankind. And even humiliation on her red table talk, her talk show, where she was saying she had an entanglement with August. She is actually announcing to the whole world that she's a married woman, but she was smashed by a young man. A young man who was sick, okay, in his own house. So you look at that show, it shows you see Will Smith as a man that is drowning in emotional paperwork. The result of this is erosion of respect and collapse of his masculine image. He ended up slapping Chris Rock and losing all respect in Hollywood. So, in Mating in Captivity, Perel stresses that desire is killed when intimacy becomes negotiation. Will's case illustrates the red pill principle. Compliance signals weakness, not worth. So there's a reason why compliance never works. Okay? Women don't respect men who fall under pressure. A hypergamy, which is women's instinct to seek the highest value mate, as explained in David Bass' Evolution of Desire, means that the more a man compromises his sovereignty to appease emotional demands, the more he signals weakness. So it's a double-edged sword. And we say in Unplug that you cannot negotiate respect with a woman. You either command it through your frame or you lose it through compromise. There are no two ways. You cannot negotiate respect. The same way you cannot negotiate desire. So there are also other books that support this idea. Warren Farrell in The Myth of Male Power shows how society positions men as disposable providers. And Gaines also warns that pedestalizing women breeds disrespect. Esther Vilar's Manipulated Man also critiques the cultural scripting that turns men into unpaid emotional laborers. So what can we do, guys? Now that we are living in a society where women are being taught through social media and the mainstream media that they need to keep escalating their demands and men are supposed to comply. What can you do? What is the option outside of being a beta male or being a simp? The first thing, you have to hold frame under bureaucratic pressure. So when she escalates with emotional paperwork, don't scramble to comply. Stay calm, stay centered, and stay decisive. Storms test sovereignty, not sympathy. Okay? Remember that. So these shit tests are for testing your sovereignty. You're not supposed to respond with sympathy. Hold your frame, hold your center, stay in your center and in your core. The second thing is you need to shift from validation to leadership. Instead of reassurance, you need to lead through direction. Tell her this is how it's going to be. Okay? Esther Perel shows us in Mating in Captivity that erotic energy thrives on polarity, not appeasement. So operate from a sense of abundance, not scarcity mindset. Most men who comply to these escalating demands are men who are operating from scarcity. And this is why you must know your sexual marketplace value. And this is why you must always be your best version. You must be in good shape. You must have your money right. Stay ambitious. Always build. And that is how you create options. You cannot expect to be a fat guy who doesn't take care of himself, who does not prioritize his looks, his smells, who is not confident, and then expect to operate from abundance. You'll be operating from scarcity, and you're going to be a beta male who complies to our demands. Okay? Then the third thing is you need to set boundaries without guilt. Skinner, the behavioral psychologist, says in Science and Human Behavior that you need to establish consistent responses. I'm not going to argue about this all night. Let's revisit tomorrow when we are calm. Okay? Establish consistent responses. So if she's badgering you and trying to draw you into arguments, just say, no, we're not going to do it now. Okay? And it is unfortunate because there's something that we're normally taught when you're growing up or in the church. You're told never go to bed without a grudge or with a grudge unresolved and so on and so forth. This is not true. You must be able to set boundaries. You're not captive to any particular situation or person. Okay? So the fourth thing you have to do is to communicate with the tactical brevity. Rollo Tomassi says in Rational Male that over-explaining collapses frame. Be concise. Just tell her, noted, this is a plan. Okay? Don't over-communicate. We say that demonstrate, don't explicate. Okay? And there's a very important thing that Rollo Tomassi also says. He says the message is in the medium. Your body language, what you do speaks more than what you say. Your words actually don't matter. The fifth thing is you must cultivate brotherhood outside of marriage. So men collapse when they outsource all the emotional needs to women. You don't need to tell a woman everything that you're going through. You need to have a brotherhood. You need to have close male friends that you can share what you are going through. Women, by having the womb, already have so much they are going through. Okay? Remember that the word hysterical comes from the word womb in Greek. It's something like history. Remember, like hysterectomy is the removal of the womb. So hysteria is very related to having a womb. At least the Greeks conceptualize it that way. So don't take your problems to a woman, okay? The woman already has enough problems. Have a brotherhood. Don't be a lone wolf. Be a part of men. Find men that you can actually bond with and share your issues with, your advices with. So brotherhood is the antidote to this loneliness that some men find in their marriages. Many of these guys who commit suicide is because they have nobody to share what they are going through. When they realize everyone is going through similar things, they will actually not commit suicide. So it's very important that you prioritize this. Have a brotherhood outside of your marriage. Don't have your woman as the only emotional outlet or partner that you know. So in closing, gentlemen, the emotional bureaucracy is the hidden tax of modern marriage. You can either drown in its endless paperwork or you can master it. And what we've been talking about is I've given you tools for mastering it. Refuse to simp, refuse to over-explain, refuse to negotiate your sovereignty. Okay? Instead, you should embody frame and masculine leadership. Because in the end, marriage is not about being the chief administrative officer of her feelings. It's about being the chief executive of your own frame. And only men who preserve their sovereignty can transform bureaucracy into balance and reclaim true intimacy. I'll see you on the next one.